One of the goals for the Antonito Together resident team is to provide opportunities for the community to develop or further develop cohesion, especially within the Hispanic culture. We fear that many aspects of the culture are being lost to the younger generations. The Museum of Memory project is providing an opportunity for youth in our community to learn about and connect to their culture, both past and present.
My name is Alejandra Cortez. I'm the education coordinator at the Fort Garland Museum and Cultural Center. I'm also one of the many people that help guide and lead this initiative and project. So this project started back in January of 2020. The project was not only a partnership with Antonito Together, but it was also a partnership with the South Conejos School District. When we were in our setting of our classroom, we had 10 amazing students that participated with us, and we were making some wonderful progress with their training in oral history and piecing together what this project possibly might look like. But this came all to a halt in March 2020. That's when COVID pretty much stopped everyone's world, and we didn't get out of this standstill until maybe the end of March. So early April is when the team being Antonito Together and South Conejos School District and History Colorado decided that, okay, we can continue, but we are going to continue online. And once we made that decision, the school district also made the decision of elective classes no longer being a required thing. That kind of threw a wrench in the way we were thinking things. So we had to approach our students about, hey, this is no longer required in the classroom setting. We were hoping that you would continue with us as a separate thing compared to school. So a lot of them wanted to continue, but unfortunately couldn't continue with us due to family situations that were brought on by COVID or other situations that were brought on due to COVID. So our group dwindled down to very few students, and with those students, they worked their butts off and created this project that we have here in front of you. And I think this project tells a wonderful story, not only of Antonito's past, but also of their present and what they are going through now.
I am from books, from food and fights. I am from the greenhouse on 11th Street, where smells of cooking are always in the air. I am from the sunflower, the lilac bush whose long gone limbs I remember as if they are my own. I'm from the Conejos River and fishing for trout. From grandma and mom. I'm from unconditional love and sitting at the table during dinner and from laughing. I'm from get away and make me a PB&J and the apple don't fall too far from the tree. I'm from birthday parties. I'm from Mogote and Grandpa Roach. Pitas and green chili, from my aunties fighting, from my auntie's death. Pictures of all the grandchildren on my grandma's wall. My secret box which holds all my loves. The secrets which cloud my mind but are never spoken out loud.
I'm from Ortiz, Colorado.
How long have you lived here?
In Conejos, I had lived in Conejos since maybe 40 years, since 75.
Did you go to school here?
Yes, I went to school in Antonito High School.
You graduated from here?
I graduated from Antonito High School and went to Antonito School from first grade to 12th.
I grew up here.
You grew up here
In Lobatos.
in Los Vatos. What was it like?
Well, It was wonderful. I was, my mama was a widow.
Was it hard?
It was hard. It was hard because she had 8 of us. So it was hard. She had to, and she was only 35. So it was hard for her. But my 2 older sisters kind of worked to bring bread to the table. Like my mama would say, kind of worked so they could bring bread to the table.
Lovatos has definitely gone down in size.
Yes, Lovato has.
Because you went to high school here, right? Like there was school here
In Antonito.
In Antonito?
Yes.
And then was there like school here for you guys? Like
Yes, we had a little school here. I think I went to the 5th grade here.
So growing up here, was it like super hard for like you to like have access to let's say like basic necessities?
Well, I was taken in by Merce Middle Miss, so I didn't have to walk to school because I was on the bus at that time. So she took me in, and I lived with her, and it was nice. It was beautiful. I had all my whatever I needed with her. She was like my second mom, so I was okay.
And were you taught by the nuns?
I was taught by the nuns.
Did you enjoy that?
Yes, I did.
You did?
Yes, I did. In fact, at the Sacred Heart Orphanage, I was with the nuns.
At the nuns, with the nuns still. So you couldn't escape them, huh?
No, I couldn't escape them, and I loved them.
400 ciudades anduve, 400 más las andaré. Pero amor como mi piel tan linda, nunca, nunca lo encontraré.
What did you used to do when you were younger on your free time?
As a kid? Yeah. Play softball, basketball with the neighborhood kids, kick the can.
Growing up in like Lovatos and going to school and how was that hard?
It was pretty good. I liked it.
What did you like about it?
And we had nuns for teachers, so they were pretty good. They were strict, but at least we learned, You didn't mess around in school.
So, going to school with the nuns, was your first language English or Spanish?
Mine was already English.
So, it wasn't hard for you to...
No, it wasn't hard for me.
So,
my brother had a hard time. They thought he was deaf because he didn't answer them, but it wasn't that he couldn't hear them, it's just that he didn't know what they were saying.
So how was learning in elementary school?
The teachers then, I think all the teachers are good,
Did you have the nuns?
Yes, I did.
How were they as teachers?
When they were small, they were strict.
Mm-hmm.
They were strict. So, yeah, I think I was about a freshman when they first started to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And they were already out of their habit.
Mm-hmm.
They were already dressing up like regular people, like a regular person.
They weren't nuns anymore, but they were
They
nuns.
were nuns, but they were already, some of them were already getting out of their habit and wearing regular clothes. And they were mean. I remember in junior high, one time I followed I had a cousin that, either you do what she says or anybody, bullies. I guess you could call them bullies then. And she wanted to go to the high school. We weren't supposed to be in the high school from junior high. And one of the nuns, the principal, I think it was, or maybe even the superintendent, and they were nuns, and she caught us, and at that time they could spank you. They used to use a paddleboard. Yeah, so we got that. For we weren't supposed to be in the high school. When we were in school, we lived 7 miles from Antonito, because that was Ortiz. So it wasn't that easy for us to get a ride just to come to town anytime.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and we used to ride bikes. And then we used to go to the river. We used to just get together and go to the river and just sit there just like teenagers would. When we were teenagers and stuff, we'd come to the dance every Saturday night if we could find a ride.
Where was the dance at?
At the Golden Nugget, at the Rainbow, at the Dutch Mill. You know, all them places that, you know, there was always a dance somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And you would have that $1 to get into the dance. We never, maybe another $1 to buy a pop or something, but that was it. But we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of fun. And that's where I met your tío at the dance. In high school, summer came around. We dreaded that summer would come around because we knew we had to go out and work for the summer to help our parents.
What did you do?
We went to the lettuce.
Like the lettuce fields?
The lettuce fields. We worked there all summer long.
Is that all?
All summer long we worked there. We helped our parents collect money for the winter. And then our very last paycheck, it was ours to do what we wanted to. We would go and buy school clothes or whatever we needed. And that's when we worked a little harder. so we could make more money. And every Saturday when we got paid, when they paid us, they would stop us here at G6, and we would get whatever we wanted. Well, banana split or sundae, ice cream, whatever you wanted. That was our treat for the week.
So they like take you on a bus?
We sometimes we would drive. Grandpa and Grandma would drive us to work. It depends where the work was at.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we went in the back of a truck with a shell, and all of us went in there. Whoever worked, a lot of young kids worked. And Grandma and Grandpa would go on front with the bosses. But everybody else, we all went in the back of the truck. And then a couple of times they had a bus. At least we could spread out in a bus. Actually, we had a bus. And we went, we would have to go all the way to Fort Garland, or we never went, up to Fort Garland we went. Yeah, it was all right. I enjoyed my years in high school. You know, I tried my best. At that time, there was typewriters, but there were the manually. Those were hard because at that time, if you were lucky, if you learned in an electric one, but then if you had to do any work on a manual, that was hard because the keys were harder, and shorthand. At that time, you had to take shorthand. That was hard. That was hard.
Did you do any like extra stuff in school, like sports or?
I never did sports.
Any clubs?
At that time, when I was in school, there was no sports for girls.
There wasn't?
No, only boys.
Wow.
But there was like the pep club. I joined that, never came because, like I said, I never had a ride. Tia Marietta did because she was a pom-pom girl. She was a pom-pom girl.
When you got older and you were learning Spanish, what made it difficult for you, to connect with
Oh, well, my mom always spoke Spanish, my mom and my dad, so we knew Spanish.
Just not fluently?
Well, as fluent as we speak it in Colorado. Yeah. No, because we were raised in Spanish. But then when we go to school, we had to learn English, but some of us already knew it from the older kids, that they'd come home speaking English. Of course, my mom and my dad spoke a little English, not a lot, but.
So, how like involved Grandpa was, your dad was in church? How did that like impact your life?
Well, I guess we all were raised to know bad, good from bad. So my dad belonged to the Morada, which is, I don't know if anybody knows what a Morada is, but, and we'd go every year, for Holy Week, and we'd go to the Rosary and we pray. Of course, we went to church on Sundays. My mom made us go to church on Sundays, get us up and tell us go to church. So we went to church every Sunday, and I guess we were raised to know right from wrong, I guess.
Were you like around when the penitentes were here?
A little.
A little?
I hardly ever went to the Morada.
The Morada?
Maybe if I went twice, I went with my grandma to make a visit at the cross. My grandma Fidencia. And I think I went one time with my mom.
Do you remember anything about the Morado?
Oh yes, I do. I remember the beautiful singing that they used to sing. And I remember coming from, on Good Friday, we would go to Guadalupe and then come over here for the Stations of the Cross. They were beautiful.
Were there any like family traditions?
No, the only tradition we had was on holidays. Every holiday, my mom would have a big old meal.
I remember.
She'd have your traditional, like Thanksgiving dinner, turkey, ham, mashed potatoes, gravy, and all that. And then at the same time, she'd have red chili and tamales. And so we had like 2 meals for every holiday, which was good. My mom was the best cook ever.
I agree.
But then everybody thinks their mom is the best cook ever.
You always helped your parents.
Mm-hmm.
We always helped the parents. Those days, you help your parents. And we even worked in the winter, and the potatoes, picking potatoes.
Mm-hmm.
Picking potatoes. Those
In the
were
winter?
In about October, when it's time for the harvest,
Mm-hmm.
to pick up the potato.
At Nido, like how at Nido's always been like more of like a Hispanic, Spanish and like Catholic and stuff, and like seeing like that part leave at Nido, is that like super hard, or is it just like it's like a whatever thing too? More of like the culture leaving?
Yeah. Just because I was raised with that culture, like the tight-knit family and the culture going to church every Sunday. And I mean, I know everybody is raised differently, but now if you go to church, you don't even really see younger people there. It's all the older people. And I'm guilty myself. I mean, my dad raised my sister and I to go to church every Sunday and stuff. And I've kind of faded away from that too, not with bad intentions, but I guess just things change with time, and the culture isn't there, like you say. Like, it's completely different than when I grew up, and it's sad to see the culture and all that fading away. But if it's important to the parents that are there in Atnido still, they'll teach their kids.
That makes sense. Because I know like a lot of people that I've interviewed, they've always like told me like certain stuff like about like their grandparents, or like old like tales like that, like the Llorona and like the freaking owls being witches and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't know. That's one for sure that we grew up. I guess it was kind of a scare tactic. Folklore and stuff like that. But I don't know. I don't really know how to feel about that kind of stuff because that's part of our culture too, is to believe our grandparents about that kind of stuff, and my grandma used to say like you said, like about the owls being witches and stuff. And honestly, that's something I grew up believing, and I still do believe that because of how they would always constantly tell us that. So I'm not even kidding you. If I see an owl on the road and it's not moving, you bet I am not going to run over that owl because I'm not going to hear about some bruja dead in the morning. But yeah, but I don't know. I guess it's just those folklore stories that our grandparents told us that we need to hold on to, because once they're gone, we'll never hear them again or never get it back.
What things ties you to Antonito, besides your family?
There's so many things. So one thing that tied me back to Antonito, is the family ranch for sure. I went to college in Pueblo for 1 year, and so everyone in Antonito, once they graduate, they can't wait to leave, and this and that, and you know how that goes. So that was never my plan. I planned to stay out of leave later on in my life, but I left right away and I came running home 1 year later. It's just the community. One thing I've told my dad and my family is that in Pueblo, I would go to the grocery store and see hundreds of people I didn't know. And now that I'm back home, I go to hometown, and you can walk in and have 10 different conversations with 10 different people you know by the time you leave. So it's really nice to know people, I guess. I know for some people that can be good and bad, but that's one thing that I really, really missed, is being able to go to the store and talk to people, or I guess just having people that you know, not necessarily even family, but everybody in the valley is so close. If you don't know them, they probably know you because of your parents or your grandparents. So I think that's one of my favorite things about the valley, is that we are all so close, and like I say, just being able to talk to everyone and have conversations about different things.
So my first question is, do you think the community would have provided the same support if coronavirus had happened as you were growing up? So support is in offering meals or doing online, well, you really didn't have online classes, but other smaller classes or anything like that?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that you say that. Is our community in Antonito, and I'm sure it's almost hasn't really changed throughout the years. I started school in around 1955, 56, around there, when I was 6 years old. And the community was always very cohesive, like it is now, maybe even greater then. Everybody kind of took care of their own. So I imagine they would have found ways to offer services for people in the event of an epidemic such as this. I know that back in 1918, I wasn't born then, but in 1918, the Spanish influenza hit pretty hard here in the valley, and especially in our community. Many people passed away during that time, but things were way different then. In the 1950s, when I was going to school, I think we would have had a lot more services. We had medical services. We had our local doctor. We had a doctor that lived right in the community at the time. So I think we would have probably fared fairly well if we would have had some sort of an epidemic at that time. So I don't think things would have been much different. I think the people in the community would have been offered a lot of help towards each other. We had and we still have a strong church group in the community, mostly the Catholics, but they have Presbyterian and other church groups also. So I don't think we would have had much different.
You know, I think it would have been a little bit more serious than it is right now, simply because back then people would get really scared with certain things. I mean, you know, when measles first came in, for example, or polio or anything like that, our parents were really apt to take us and make sure we had shots. And you know, because polio did hit when I was growing up, so there were kids that were born with polio, and so it was really a difficult time. I have an aunt who was impacted by polio. I have a cousin who was impacted by polio. So polio was taken very serious at that time. They managed to get rid of polio through vaccines, etc. But you know, I just heard a few years back that polio was coming back. Anyway, long story short, the community really, there was a big scare over polio because it was so impactful on people. And so everybody took it very serious. You know, if it was just a rumor of what not to do because you might get polio, or, you know, people stayed away from a lot of different things just because of it. So I would say they would have been just a little bit more serious.
What do you think the community would have done had you had a situation like this happen when you were in school?
Well, I think looking back and seeing the sizes of our class sizes, I think when I went to school, almost between 1956 and 1969, we had nearly 1,000 kids in the school. And now I think we might have close to 150 or somewhere around there. So our class sizes were a lot bigger. So we probably would have had to make major adjustments to that. I remember my classes usually were 20 or 30 kids in the classroom. So we would have had to make adjustments for class size. As far as food for the community, I think it's almost like it is now. I don't know what the community is doing now to assist people that might be lacking in food, or if people have lost jobs and so forth, if the community is helping them out. I'm not really involved with that now, but I think back then, going back, well, almost 60 years ago, I think we would have probably had more of the community people getting together. I don't know if we had organizations like we have now, like we didn't have a food bank at that time. So we would rely on the local grocery. We actually had at that time maybe three grocery stores here in the community that I can remember. And I think they probably would have been very amenable to trying to help out the community as best as possible.
What do you think your daily life would have looked like back then had we been going through this epidemic?
Well, it's almost like it is now. That's the thing. The community hasn't really changed that much. So we didn't have a bowling alley. We didn't have a community center. We did have one local theater, but actually in the summer, for example, there wasn't much to do. So if you didn't live out in the farm or ranch, you almost stayed home all the time. So we were almost socially isolated back in the day, just almost like it is right now. Kids nowadays can get on a car and go to Alamosa. In my day, it would be very difficult. Going to Alamosa was like going to Denver. It is like going to Denver is now. So we sort of by choice, not by choice, but because we had to, we almost social distance ourselves just normally. I know I lived out in the farm, so like in the summers, I hardly ever got together with friends or anything. So it was not that difficult in those days. Things were a lot simpler then, kind of sort of like it is now, but it was more so then.
Oh my gosh, that would be interesting because, you know, there was no such place as a Walmart to go get your toiletries and everything else, you depended on a local grocery store. So I'm going to say, and at that time, back then, we had 2 grocery stores, but I couldn't say that they would have been well equipped to handle the type of for lack of a better term, scare that went into shopping. People, toilet paper became a big issue. Meat. I don't think meat would have been a problem for this community because a lot of people were ranchers. But I'd say those essentials such as toilet paper. But then, I'll tell you what, I grew up at a time when, if you didn't have toilet paper, they were giving you a magazine, and you were using an outdoor potty. So that was my grandma's house. There was no such thing as toilet paper. There was no, you learned you learned to use what was given to you at that time. And now the luxury of toilet paper is just a little bit different. There was no choice of what you were going to eat for breakfast. You were given what you were given. And I remember my fight and my battle over having to have atole for breakfast. And atole is blue corn, but that was customary.
People were kind of more isolated back then, so it was not, we didn't really come into town a lot. We lived 4 miles east of here, so we really didn't come into town. So I think it may have been tougher because people would have, I think, panicked more. People wouldn't have really known what to do, what it was really all about. I think they would have, more guesswork, and so I don't know. I think it would have been a little tougher back then. As far as keeping people in masks, I think it would have been tough for people to get masks back then because I don't think they were really that readily available to the general public, I think you would have to gone to a specialty store or something like that back then.
So talk about your daily life in school. Like what did your daily life look like back then going to school?
Well, it's no different than it is today. Just an FYI to you, women's sports were not available when I was in school. There was no such thing as women's athletics. The most that women could do was cheerleading, and it was not considered a sport. Definitely, if we were going to travel for cheering, we had to travel on our own vehicles with our parents or whatever, but we weren't allowed on the buses. So school was the same, academics were the same. They were pretty serious about their academics. We went to school with nuns, so that was a very serious factor. First of all, language was taken away, your culture was taken away, so you didn't know that. You just knew what you knew at home. But the focus was academics. That was the nuns, and that's what they did. Their life was academics. Did they let us teeter away from things? Well, no, not really. Going to a basketball game, for example, you couldn't sit with a boyfriend, or you couldn't hold hands. You couldn't do things like that. You couldn't, there was no PDA allowed. So that was one thing. Sports were just, they were really cut out for the males. So you had football, wrestling, basketball, and baseball. But cheerleading was, for basketball, was the only thing girls got to do. Outside of that, it wasn't, there wasn't a whole lot because we still had homecomings, and we did going to garages and building our floats and so forth. And we had dances. One thing we did have was dances, and there was a lot of participation for dances, and I don't see that going on now. It was very spirited. Athletics is a very spirited event, but it brought in the whole community. It brought in everyone because there's not a whole lot to do in a small town. So I've always said it's a cheap form of babysitting because sometimes that's what people do. They just go not really to watch the TV, but they just go just to get out of the house. So, but school was the same. You had a lot more clubs. It was a larger school. I think I went to school with 74 my freshman year, 74 in my class. I graduated with 33. It changed. Academics were there. We had a lot more competitions. We had debate teams. We had a lot of booster clubs and what do you call it, a pep squad. We had things like that for girls, but not a whole lot.
Well, we didn't have the buildings like they have now. Actually, there was the buildings were built around the Depression time because of all the buildings except for the old high school were built by the WPA. It's called the Workers Project Administration, Works Project Administration, and they were built. So we had old buildings. But the regular school day was almost like they are now. You would have in the elementary school, you would have the regular classes. I mean, you learned how to read, you learned the mathematics, and a little bit of history probably in the elementary. And then later on, it became a little bit more elaborate. In high school, we ended up taking the normal classes. The only thing different was the opening. And that might have even changed towards the end of my, like, while I was in high school. I don't remember praying in high school, but I remember in the lower grades we would pray in the beginning of the day. But the day was normal, just like it is now. We studied the core classes and so forth. Our recess time was we did the same things that we normally kids do nowadays. We got together. We used to play a lot of games that maybe they don't do now. We played a lot of marbles, and when I was in elementary school, marble games and so forth. But other than that, it was pretty consistent to what it is now, other than the religious aspects of it.
Well, did you think that schools back then were better than schools now?
That's a tough call. I'll tell you what I like about now is the availability of information. I think technology is just wonderful. I'm a firm believer that you can be anybody you want to be. It's first of all based on the support that you're given from home, and the intent that you have. If you're serious, whatever it is you want, anybody can reach that. But as far as schools, I think schools have gotten a lot more lenient, but I also think that technology is so available and so progressive that I really like it. I like what's going on. I like seeing what's happening for students. I just think it would have been nice we had some of those things. If the school is better, the nuns were really good teachers. I felt I could never take that away from them. Their life was committed to teaching because they didn't have anything else. And so they made it exciting. They made it competitive. They made it, but that's nuns. I don't know other schools,
I don't really think so because there's been more technology nowadays. I think teachers have more access to different deals nowadays. Back then it was really strictly to the book. Now there's videos or whatever, even your phone, and a lot more information that's available now.
Well, the thing I noticed, and I think anybody that went through the schooling with the nuns, they felt like there was a lot of not only discipline by the school teachers, and also the nuns. The nuns were the teachers, and the administrators were the teachers. All were also nuns. So I think there was a lot of discipline that was through the school. I think nowadays, like even when I was a principal, I tried to bring in a lot of as much discipline as possible. But what I noticed is that I think the kids when I was going to school and the nuns were the teachers and the administrators, I think there was a lot more self-discipline, and I think that self-discipline came from the families' homes. And I think, but nowadays, because we have a lot of families that are either broken families or, I mean, they either don't have a dad or they don't have a mom. Sometimes there's less discipline at the time. As far as the curricular part of it, like the subjects and so forth, I think in a certain respect, I felt I got a good education from the nuns. I felt like it was a pretty excellent education. When I was a principal, I try to bring that into my curriculum. Not what the nuns taught, but what I thought and when my studies brought to me that would enable students to be more successful in their lives. So and it's a hard thing to kind of compare. It's like comparing apples and oranges sometimes, but I felt like there was a good education at that time, and I felt like when I was a principal, there was good education going on. It was more difficult because society brings down a lot of problems. Now we're facing coronavirus, but then we also have a lot of teen suicides, and we have a lot of, not so much in this community, but I'm talking about in general, and then also addiction and substance abuse and so forth. I'm not saying that in those days we didn't have alcohol as a problem. There was some, but I think things have kind of become greater some of the societal problems have become greater in the schools now. So it's difficult to really compare. I do feel like education in my day was good. The nuns had a reputation for being very very aggressive to making people learn. And I don't know if it's that much now, but then we didn't have computers, we didn't have a lot of modern. We didn't have cell phones in those days naturally, and nowadays somebody can use a cell phone like we use computers here at home.
It's taken away simplicity. And I sometimes really think that simplicity is very important. I was just talking to these friends that were visiting, and I was thinking about my nieces and nephews when we were talking about kids and kids entertaining themselves. And the little girl that was here, she's 7 years old, and she was bored. Her grandma's phone went dead. She stayed with her grandma. Her grandma's phone went dead. And, I tried pulling out construction paper for her, crayons. She just wasn't interested in anything, nothing. She wanted to be on her grandma's phone, or she wanted to be on her iPad. And I saw that with my sister and her grandchildren, and I said, wow, creativity has really gone, because I had bought them some paints. I had bought them some sewing kits so that they could do some little crafts and things like that. That was of no interest to them. The simplest things in life for them was not of interest. And I'm wondering about that, because sometimes I think that's a pretty basic thing to learn, is to sew or to learn to draw or be creative, and to step outside of your box and not depend on a box to help you think or to keep you entertained.
When I was growing up, I had where there were 7 of us kids, 7 children. It wasn't unusual that we had large families here in this community. Mine was probably sort of in the middle. I mean, some people even had 12, 15, 20 kids, and some families were 2 or 3. But we were up there around 7. So I had plenty of playmates when I was going to school, and in the summers we would just spend a lot of time together, go to the mountains with our parents. And actually, my dad used to take care of cattle up in the mountains, so we would all go as a family and live up in a cabin in the mountains all summer long. So I really didn't need, we were socially isolated from the society, but we weren't socially isolated from each other. We were right there with each other. So I think maybe that's the way it is still, kind of. A lot of our families, they live out in the rural areas, and they have their own little lives, and they almost like just by fact are socially isolated, just because that's the way life is here in the rural Colorado and San Luis Valley.
I come from the Chicos in the Fields. the lights of Las Vegas to the wood Grandpa cut with his bare hands, the home Mom left and the home we're building. I come from the patience Vaya has taught me to the fears my dad has given me. I come from knowing that the sunrise needs to be seen and the thunder needs to be heard. I come from Grandma's fresh chicken casserole. I come from Grandpa's COPD, knowing that every breath is a heaven sent. I come from the Lady of Guadalupe who buried my abuela. I come from the Lujans who have grown to Antonitos.
Las barrancas te aguardo y a orilla de las veredas ensillaré mi caballo, me pondré mis chaparreras y mi sombrero grandote y ahora sí me voy de veras en las barrancas